Hi. Okay, today we're going to start our cables. Hopefully you have your 1.5 inch of knit one, purl one ribbing. Mine is finished and I'm going to set it aside, except I'm going to do one more row with you and explain to you why in just a minute. So let me put this over here for now. A few things I want to talk to you about. I have a couple tools that are really handy. I've gotten this at Amazon. It's a row counter, and what I like about it is it's adjustable, first of all. So that means that if you have bigger or smaller hands than someone else, you can adjust this to fit your finger. And I usually keep it right there. So there are two buttons on it. There's a big button, which if you push that, it goes up by one count each time. I don't know if you can see that. It's going up 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The smaller button, if you press that, it'll clear everything out. So when I'm doing something like a cable pattern, and our cable pattern has 6 rows. So, and you have to do it 5 times. When we look at our pattern, I break it down this way. We're not ready to decrease, we're just ready to do this. So I have the written instructions, and then we have a chart, and I don't really like their charts because there's too much going on for my visual eyes to catch, but I can go ahead and just follow this. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rows in a pattern, and we have to work those 1 through 6 rows. For me, it's 5 times. For those of you who are doing a different size, they're in the parentheses, and I hope you've marked those already. So for me, when I'm on round 1, as soon as I finish it, I'll hit 1 to tell me that I'm finished with round. And you have to figure this out yourself. You can hit it at 1 as you start it, or you can hit it at 1 as you end it. And I'll generally do it after I've finished it so that I know. That's just how I remind myself. When I've done row 2, when I've finished row 3, when I've finished row 4, when I've finished row 5. Now, instead of clearing it out, I know that I want to do this 5 times. So I know that I've finished that one, so I will go ahead and I will go up to 10, which means that I have the 1 of the 10 tells me I've done 1 complete round, and the 0 tells me I'm just starting again. So then I will do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that means I have 2 rows so that I've finished. So I will go up to the 20. Now that tells me, the first 2 tells me I have 2 rows done, and the 0 tells me that I haven't started on my 3rd set. So this is something that you can keep in mind. You can also clear it out and make yourself little tick marks on your pattern. For example, if you finished 1 round of this, you could put a tick mark up at the top of your page. There are other ways to do that, and you kind of have to find out for yourself how you want to do that. I like this. There are other row counters out there available, and find one that works for you and be happy with it. The second thing that I wanted to show you is a chart keeper, and this is from Knit Picks. I have a pattern in there right now that I was working on for lace. Let me move that aside. It's really nice because I can put my pattern, you can put a whole pattern in here like this if you want to, but a lot of times I break my patterns up. And then it came with, I think, 3 magnets. So I'll put a big one down at the bottom just to keep the whole thing in check. And then whatever row I'm on, for example, I'm doing this. Now, since I'm working at the bottom, I might put this at the top, just to keep it out of the way. So when I'm working on round 1, that's what I'll do. I'll hide all my all the other rounds that follow it. Can you see that? There we go. I have my magnet under row 1, so that tells me I'm working on row 1. I can move it to row 2, 4, and 6, and that's what you do on those rows, and you can move it. The other thing that I wanted to show you is if you have a hard time following, and especially with cables, because there's so many different things we do with cables, you might want to go ahead and use your magnet first of all, but then you might also want to use one of these little stickies, and I have to knit 4. So I'll go ahead and just let the 4 show. I'll get those 4 knit, and then I'll move it to the next comma, which is cable 4 in the back. And then we will show you how we're going to do cable 4 in the back. And then once I have those 4 finished, I will move it to the next comma, which tells me cable 4 in the front. And you can do this throughout your whole pattern, and it helps you if you're not familiar with working with patterns. It will kind of keep you a little bit organized. There's nothing wrong with doing that. You go ahead and do what makes it easy for you to do your patterns. Okay, so there is down at the bottom of your sheet a key of abbreviations, and for example, when it tells us knit 4, we know we're knitting 4. C4B is cable 4 back, which then they tell you how to do the cable 4 back. You slip 2 stitches to the cane, which is your very small cable needle, and you hold those in back of your work. You knit 2 from your left hand needle, and then you knit 2 from the cane. So we are going to go ahead and we will do that, although not today, because I am going to show you a few other things that I want us to be able to be familiar with, which will transfer to other patterns, other knit work that we're going to do. So let's go ahead and put our cable aside, or our pattern aside for now, and I want you to go ahead and get your work out. So I am using the Knit Picks needles. The nice thing about Knit Picks needles is when you look, I'm going to move some of my yarn down. When you look at the ends of your needles, there are 2 holes. And if you flip it over, one hole goes entire the whole way through. I don't know if you can see that. There we go. One goes the whole way through, and then on the other side there are 2, and one of them doesn't. And this one, the smaller one at the bottom, it's used to tightening it up, for tightening your needle onto your cable. So the one that has the hole that going through, the nice thing about these needles is you can actually, especially when you're doing lace or cables, you might want to thread a piece of thread around your knitting so that in case you make a big mistake and you have to rip back, you don't have to rip completely back to the front and start all over. You only have to knit back as far as where you've put a thread. So let me show you how we do that. If you have some sewing thread, this is the best thing to use. And I'm going to use this really bright yellow because it will show up against my dark green. If you have a light color, you might want to use a darker thread. Let me put those out of the way. Okay, so what you'll want to do with this is you'll want to go ahead and pull a little bit of thread through. Take the end of that thread, and you want to put this on the needle that has your working yarn. Hang on, I'm going to try and get this. There we go. It'll stay out of the way then. So this is my needle that has my working yarn that I'm going to start knitting with. So I want to go ahead and take the end of this thread, and I want to go ahead and thread it through that top hole so that it comes out the other side. And generally they go through pretty easily. Okay. So once I have a little bit of yarn through there, I will go ahead and tie, not a tight knot because you want to be able to cut this off later. I will tie a knot, and then I will do a second knot around that and tighten it up. I don't want to tighten it clear to my needle. I just want to make like a little hole. Let me pull that out of the way so you can see. So as you can see, I have just a little bit of a hole so that I can take my scissors through there later. There we go. I can take my scissors through there a little bit later and cut it. So what this is going to do, it's going to drag this thread the entire way through as you knit. So let's go ahead. I'm going to do one more row of knit and purl. If you want to, you could just do a complete knit row to kind of set yourself up for doing the cables. That's fine too. It's not a problem. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to push these all the whole way down through. Now remember, we start our row where our little tail is. And I have my thread on one side and my sewing thread on the other, and I have it a little bit twisted, so give me just a minute to get all of this untwisted. I don't want it to be all twisted up. There we go. So I'm going to put my thread on one side and my yarn on the other. Now, go ahead and pull your needle, and you can see it pulls both your thread and your yarn. And I think I'm just going to go ahead and knit through the first row. So I'm knitting in the front, knitting in the back of my purl stitches, knitting in the front, knitting in the back of my purl stitches. So as I do this, now you can't see it yet because my yarn is still here, my thread is still here. But as I start to pull and get this entirely knit, I can pull it through. And it will give me, it's called a lifeline. And a lot of people do it when they're doing lace because lace is a little bit more difficult. But I have also, many people do it when they do cables also, because cables can be, they can be a little tricky. You just have to be aware of where you are, how you finished. And another nice trick is to keep notes. You can keep a notebook. I don't know if any of you have seen the notebook that I keep for my paper work when I make boxes and books and things, but I keep a nice little, it's just a composition book that I've covered in paper. And let me get to the end of this row and I will show you that. Keep notes. Just write things down, and when you finish something, tell yourself where you are, where you're supposed to start. A lot of times I have 2 or 3 different ways that I do that. Okay, so I'm at the end. I'm going to push my other needle through. And I'm going to pull my right one through. Now you can see I've drawn that thread through the entire side that I have gone ahead and finished. And so let's go ahead and knit this side, knit in the front, knit in the back of the purl, and I hope you're getting familiar with how your stitches lay, whether they're laying with the right leg on top, which is my knit stitches, or if your right leg is on the bottom, which is my purl stitches. And that tells me if I knit in the front or if I knit in the back. I hope we've been practicing that enough that that's just starting to become second nature to you. You don't even really have to think about which stitches you are doing at the time. It just becomes a habit, what it's called is muscle memory. And your brain has to take time to learn something, but after it's learned it and you do it enough repetitions, you actually have made pathways from your brain to whatever your muscles you're using. And so I've actually made pathways from my brain to my hands, my arms, my knitting. It's almost, I'm not saying it is, but it's almost mindless. I don't have to think a whole lot of whether I'm knitting in the front, knitting in the back of a purl. So you do develop a certain rhythm. That's a little bit big. Oh. Okay, so I accidentally pulled that off. I'm going to fix it. I have both threads. This is the thread that should be coming through. I'm going to go ahead and just pull that through. And then I'm going to look at it, and I know I have to knit that one. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to go ahead and do is I am going to pull this completely through, and this is the one that we tied on our needle. I'm going to cut it. I'm not going to pull much, and I'm going to give myself a little space on the end. So you want to take both of your ends. There's one coming out of both needles, and you kind of want to have them at the bottom of your knitting so you don't get in the way. And then I'm going to go ahead and just make kind of a fast knot. I don't know if you can see that. Let me get, so I can actually, if I were to make a big mistake and I had to rip frog things, there's my thread. I'm trying to get it pulled so that you can see it. Anyway, there is a yellow thread in there. Let's do it this way. Maybe there we go. There's my yellow thread. Can you see? And it follows the length of those stitches so that if I have to pull, if I make a big mistake and I have to pull that much, then I only have to pull back to my thread, my lifeline. And that's kind of a nice thing, especially if you're doing a long piece of cable or a long piece of lace. Then you don't have to get frustrated and start the entire project over. So we are ready to start with our cable work. And I'm going to go ahead and end this video, and then we will do our next video is when we will start to do our cables. But keep your thread handy because you want to put this thread as often as you are willing to rip. So for example, I might do an entire section of my antler and then put another lifeline, and then maybe another section and put a lifeline, because if I only have a lifeline here at my ribbing stitches and I knit clear up to here and find out I've made a horrible mistake and I have to unknit, pull it, then I don't want to have to pull clear back to my ribbing. I might not be so upset if I only have to pick a couple, one set of rows out. So that's food for thought, and I hope this helps you. Go ahead and make sure you get your lifeline in, and next time I see you, we will go ahead and start our pattern of our cables. Okay, thanks. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.